video is going to cover bandwidth, and we're not going to get into a lot of detail about it or get technical, but we are going to look at why it's important and the impact that it has on events. And we know that it's having more and more impact on events and meetings as time goes on, and that will likely not change at all. So it impacts the experience of the event producer, the service providers that are providing audio, visual, and streaming and other services. And it absolutely impacts the quality of the experience for the attendee, both the in-person attendee as well as the online attendee. And probably the first thing you've got to understand is the internet service provider and what the internet service provider is about, and how they impact what your event is going to be paying for this. The internet service provider is an organization, a company that goes out and has a direct connection with very high bandwidth, very high capabilities directly to the internet, and it's typically quite expensive to do that, to be an ISP. And then they make their money by subletting that bandwidth that they have access to. And they sublet it to individuals, to companies, organizations, government, and to events. So that's how they make their money. And the reason that this is important is because they, more and more, venues are putting into their contracts that you sign to lease the venue an ISP clause. And the ISP clause quite often says that you have to use this ISP. And that might be all well and good, but before you sign that clause, you certainly want to know what your costs are going to be, and if you have the opportunity to negotiate those. The time to negotiate this is best before you sign your contract with the venue. And because once you sign that contract with the venue, of course, you're locked into that ISP and whatever their pricing is. So you need to find out what their pricing is, what your requirements are, and have that negotiated before you accept that clause in the contract. You can, and in some cases it makes sense, refuse to accept that clause, and that happens in cases where people need more bandwidth, for example, than the ISP is capable of providing. You need to know that before you sign that clause. It also, there's been cases where people have brought in their own ISP into the venue, and for various reasons that has worked out for them. So you need to really look at this before you sign off. So what is bandwidth? Well, it's basically just the amount of data that can be transmitted via upload or download, received via download, and it's typically measured per second. So how many bits per second? And there are a couple options when it comes to bandwidth. These are the two major ones. There's more than this, but shared bandwidth is important to know, because basically you're getting a set amount of bandwidth provided by the ISP, but you're sharing it with other people who may be high users of bandwidth or low users of bandwidth. But that's going to impact the performance that you're getting, the bandwidth that you're able to receive. So, it's not going to be a guarantee that you're going to get this amount of bandwidth. That's why they have dedicated options. And this is especially when you're doing something like streaming content. The streaming provider is going to insist that they get a dedicated internet connection. So as a result of that, no one else is using it, in theory, hopefully in practice as well. But in some cases we've seen where what one thought was a dedicated internet connection turned out not to be. But here you're getting a specified guarantee of performance. And at the end of this, we'll show you a tool that will help you measure that should you suspect that you're not getting the kind of bandwidth that you've contracted for. So the way I think about bandwidth size, and probably the easiest way to explain it is, this analogy, which is, you can have a pool that you're filling with a very small pipe, or draining with a very small pipe, so uploading and downloading. Or you can have that same pool and be uploading and downloading the water with a very large pipe. So it's obviously going to be much, much faster with a fatter drain pipe than it is with a skinny drain pipe. What that means from a bandwidth standpoint is this is the range that you typically would work in around an event. At the low end, 256 kilobytes per second. At the high end, 5 megabytes per second. Now you might have much more than that. You might have 10, 20, more than that. But for a particular use or application, that this is kind of the range that you'd be looking at. So at the low end, you can be doing things like email, surfing the web, not really downloading and uploading too much, but probably enough at the lower ends to be able to use some of the event apps that are out there that also need to call on the internet. As you move up, for example, if you're doing some kind of two-way Skype sessions, you're going to need at least a megabyte, if not more, and ideally that would be dedicated as well, so you knew that you were going to get that quality, consistent quality and bandwidth. And then streaming is probably at the higher end of the scale here. And most streaming companies are going to require at least 3 megabits dedicated upload and download speed. Another way that you can think about this is if you had a song, a 5 megabyte song, with a 1 megabyte per second internet connection, it would take about 40 seconds to download that song. Now, if you had that same song and you had a 10 megabyte per second connection, it would take 10 times less. So it would take just 4 seconds. So it is a very important factor. And as you develop your plan for the bandwidth, you need to take into account several different things. One is, of course, how many users you're going to have. And the other thing is how many devices those users are likely to be using. And in some events, we've seen an average of as high as 3 different devices that people are using. So they're using their phone, their notebook computer, and a tablet or iPad or something. So you need to know that, and you need to know also the likely, volume that these people will use. So certain kinds of events will have people who are very high users and very frequent users and are using large amounts of bandwidth. And in other events, not so much. So you need to know that to be able to put together your plan for how much bandwidth you need and where and when that's going to be. Because essentially this is, as simple as kind of the food and beverage planning that you have to do. Essentially, this is, to some degree as simple as the food and beverage planning that you have to do. You have to know where people are going to be, what time they're going to be there, and how much they're going to consume. So, it's very similar to the broadband that you have to plan for. And just a couple things that you should remember. One is that there is a tool out there, or a set of tools, I should say, at MyCoolTools.com. And why this is important that you have that is when you are at the event and someone hands you an Ethernet cable, a little plug that comes out of the wall, and they say, here is your T2 line. Here is your T3 line, what have you, and they have agreed to a certain amount of upload download speed and dedicated to you. It's really hard to tell by looking at that cable. So what you need to do is plug that cable into a computer and go to mycooltools.com, and the first thing you want to do is check your upload speed and your download speed and the quality of your line. And there's tools that will do that for you. Now, of course, the ISP can do that, but it's also very handy to be able to look at that and say, well, we're not getting the speed according to this that we have contracted for. Or if there's some problem with, say, the streaming that you're doing, you're dropping the stream because of something like dropped packets somewhere in the internet connections that are coming into the building and coming to your computer. There's a tool on there that will help you identify where your internet is originating from and all of the different hops it's taking to get to your computer. And it will also help identify problems with any of those hops. So if there is a problem, the ISP can change the configuration of your internet and get you a higher quality line. So that's it. And also, be sure to check out the Virtual Edge Institute website. This is an area that is constantly changing, and we expect to see that continue. So we'll be covering it on an ongoing basis on the Virtual Edge pages as well.